Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going back in the beginner series, a couple of soldering tips. What my goal is today is see if I can ruin this tip just for you. You guys are ready? Let's keep watching. So here's the first tip. What you want to do is you want to make sure the tip is clean. Now what I use is like a bronze cleaner. It's a bronze wool polishing pad, if you can see that. It comes in like a 4 or 5 pack. So what you do is you just stuff it into the soldering iron holder, like right here, because it actually cleans the tip, even if it's dead or rusted. I mean, sometimes you need to put a little bit of solder onto it to soften it up. But when you jab it, they always say to jab it before you solder, and then jab it after you solder. So that way when you jab it like this, it's going to keep that tip clean. But that's what I always do first. And then I'll put a little bit of solder on the tip. So now that tip is just kind of on there, right? You kind of jab it some more with and that way it just kind of keeps it really clean. So of course the first tip is to keep your tip clean. My next tip is to get this as hot as we can. Change my settings on my soldering iron. So we're going to change the settings now. Increase it up to 850. So now it's 850. Hit enter. So now that's the real temperature. So that temperature is going to go to 850. Okay. So let's see what happens to the pad. Like we said, we're going to try to either ruin the tip or even lift the pad. I haven't lifted a pad yet. Maybe we'll do it today. Let's see. So this is at 850 now. So let's take the pad and let's heat it up. Some people like to use flux. I use flux only if I have to. In this case, I might, so I can really heat up the pad, I'll just use this little screwdriver and put some right here. So that should heat up pretty quick. So we're going to heat it up at 850 and see what happens. I think my gadget's falling apart here. Let's heat it up. Right. I mean, normally when you see it this hot already, you're good to go. But let's see what happens to the pad when you heat it up at 850. Also depends on the board. It's your average board, but it's not really doing a whole lot. I think if it was a board that's not too well manufactured, it may probably lift, but right now it's not. Right? Some people like to use 750 as like a good temperature for all around soldering. In my case, if it's depending on the weather outside, I'll probably use 800 if it's colder during the night. But right now it's pretty warm outside, so we could keep it at 750, but even right now we'll keep it at 850 and you'll see what happens when you try to actually solder the pad. So let's solder the pad right now, this one here. So we didn't use any flux. It's fairly hot, so this should heat up pretty quick. Okay, so no flux, it's at 850. It'll heat it up pretty quick. And we can just put the solder on. And what I do, and you just kind of do circles so it spreads the heat, then you just kind of tap it. And right now that's kind of like when you see it discoloring the pad, then that means it's pretty much ready for most of solder. Right, so that's on there. You know it's on there because it's hot and it's a pretty round circle. It's kind of hard to do a cold solder on a hot day. That's a good joke, right? But we can lower the temperature especially with 850, we can lower the temperature and heat up a pad like just a little bit and see what happens. So I found another cold spot on the pad. So what I did was I turned off the iron so that it's cooling itself off. Now I'm going to turn it back on. And usually the problem is people don't wait until it's hot enough, right? So I'm trying to mimic that, because when you don't wait until it's hot enough, and that's when you have the problems. So let's do that again. So I'm turning it on, and it's saying it's about 500 degrees. So let's try doing something with that. Right? So let's heat this up. You already know it's not going to be hot enough. So you kind of tap the bubble forming on the end. That's if that sticks onto the pad, that would definitely be a cold connection. Right now it's kind of sticking but not lifting. So end up with that. So that would probably be as bad as I can make it. So here we have a connection we just did. So let's see if we could pry it off with pliers. So I take this off. Right, this should just slide right off. Not exactly working. In my case, the soldering iron can go only as low as 600 degrees. And in this case, since it's not winter, it's fairly, it's hotter here right now than it would in the winter, so the board itself isn't cold. And when the board is cold, that's when you have the problems of cold solder joints. Okay, so this next quick trick, if you can call it a trick, it's just basically the easiest way I find, to do things hands-free when you tin your wires. I just leave it on the holder and just put it on here like this. I put the wire pretty much on top. If the wire, especially a wire this thin, I might put a little bit of solder on the end so it's going to heat it up quicker. And then basically it's going to melt fairly fast, so since it's small. And you know what? I mean, the wire this size, it's I think 20 gauge or smaller. Flux is always better. I don't necessarily use it all the time. I use flux mainly on thicker wires because there's a lot more strands to go through. It melts the solder through the strands quicker. In this case, when it's such a small piece of wire, I personally don't use it, and I haven't had a problem. So now I just want to show you the ideal way I would normally put this wire on there. More of as a tip, but just more to show beginners how to put wires onto a pad the most efficient way. I'm not a soldering expert, but I've done this for so many years, and the joints I make end up sticking really well. So this is what I do. So I have my soldering iron, the temperature at 750. So here we have the soldering iron. It's set at about 750. We have the pad here. We're going to add some solder to it. Going to heat up the pad. Make it nice and even and add some solder to the pad. There you go. Now we have the solder on the pad. Now I'm going to take the wire and put it on the pad using these tweezers. Just makes it a lot, for me, it makes it a lot easier. It stiffens up the wire and makes it a little bit quicker to do. So just have to heat up the solder on the side. And push in the wire. There you go. Nice clean connection. You can always test it too. Of course, you just kind of either pull it or lift the pad up. Right now I have it stuck to the table, but I can still pull it. It's not moving. You can tell it's a pretty clean connection. The solder is all the way around the edges. It's nice, round, and shiny. And you don't see the wire exposed except for the very end. So that's a clean connection. As you do this more often, you do it with practice, it gets easier. Start off with bigger pads and then go to smaller pads. Eventually it'll get easier for you. So guys, we're in the bonus round. This is a bonus soldering tip. So what's soldering tip without unsoldering tip? So we need to unsolder this in case there's a mistake. If you have a mistake, what do? First, you take off the wire. So we're going to take this off. I have the soldering iron at about 800. Since we're just going to remove this, so just put this down here. It's laying on top of solder, so it should come out really pretty quick. So the wire's off, right? But you have solder left on the pad and you want to remove it. So the best way to do it, some people use something called I think they call it a solder sucker, where you heat it up and it sucks it out. I haven't heard a lot of people that use it. In fact, someone told me a better way to get rid of solder is to use this super wick. It's a copper piece, and you just put it right on top. And once you heat it up, it's going to suck the solder, or it'll actually not suck the solder, but it's going to soak the solder into the copper. It's much cleaner, and you just get rid of it once it's used up. So since we have the soldering iron heated up, I'll show you how to get rid of the solder. So it's heated up to 800. You have to remember too that the copper does get hot. So if you're using your hand, it might be okay if you're far away, but if you're on there too long, it's going to get a little bit hot. So, and you do have to put a little bit of solder on your tip just to get it started. Let's get a clean portion of this. I'm going to put it right there on top of the pad. Switch out. So you have to put a little bit, you have to put pretty good force and use the edge of your soldering iron so it gets a lot of heat. Pull it down. Give it some good force and you can see it soaking in. You lift it out. You can see it's pretty clean. You could do another one just to clean it up some more. And then lift it off. You can see the pad is back to gold, which is what you want. And then you can see the residue on the copper. It turns a little silver. So you'd have to discard the part that's silver and just go on to the new portion of the coppers to get rid of some more solder if you have to. So that's how you get rid of solder on a pad. It's called super wick. Well, that's it for the video. I know in the beginning I told you my goal is to ruin that tip for you, and the tip was able to survive. I thought that 850 would ruin it for sure. But you know, if you got something out of it, please give me a like in the video. And if you want to follow me, feel free to subscribe. I post videos 2 to 3 times a week. I have a lot of flight footages to show you. So again, please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.